I left my job when I had like 1600 followers.
Oh, what? That's insane.
Bro, I'm not gonna respond to that. Yeah, I think following has nothing to do with it. I can't respond to DMs anymore now. Like I physically.
In this episode of Perspectify, we talk to Francesco Tills. Now, if you don't know Francesco, he has about 20,000 followers on Instagram and runs his own coaching services called Francesco Tills Fitness Consulting. What's really riveting about Francesco is that he started his fitness content creation while also balancing his job at EY. And once he hit about 1,500 followers on Instagram, he decided to quit his full time job and pursue his fitness content full time. Now, I personally known Francesco since childhood, and I even follow him and have even subscribed to his fitness program. And if you're a beginner starting out on Instagram, trying to grow your Instagram business, I think this is one of those episodes where you should have your pen and paper in hand and taking a lot of notes because there are so many nuggets of information he'll throw your way, right? Now, on to our discussion with Francesco Tills. I mean, for the people who are listening to this podcast, a lot of these people are very super ambitious people who also probably want to go along the direction that you did, right? My question is, where does someone really begin? Like, as a novice, thinking of, you know what, I want to build up this Instagram following, and I feel like I want to build out a company out of that, right? Like in your case, you have a fitness company right now. How do you start, right? Because most people are too afraid to put themselves out there on social media, especially in the case of fitness where you're showing your six packs pretty prominently, right? So how does someone start, and how do you get over that initial imposter syndrome?
That's a damn good question. See, I think there's three things that would hold anyone back. At least in my case, all three of these were prevalent. I was just lucky enough to have the right people around me to sort of push me forth and make me want to believe in myself, even though on a lot of days it was just really hard to do that. First, I think is the fear of embarrassment, because the first time you put out a piece of content in your head, the biggest fear is, will it do well? Will I be made fun
Yes.
of? Will I come across as like a cringy
Absolutely.
content
Hard
creator?
relate on this. Rakshit and me are hard relating on this.
I feel like that right now because this is the first podcast I've ever been on. In my head, I'm like, to heck on be. So it happens. Like that fear of embarrassment is huge. Um, but the problem is that fear of embarrassment is more like a graduation ceremony. Because if you, let's say, do something tomorrow, let's say you have an audience tomorrow, you start your company and you offer a service or a product or whatever. What if that doesn't do well? What if you have to sidetrack from whatever it is that you're doing then? Every time you do something that has any amount of risk associated with it, there's also a risk of failure associated with it, which invariably will bring you some amount of embarrassment at any level. If you're talking in like a very small side hustle, offer a small service type of thing, or even something bigger. So in some sense, if you can't handle the embarrassment of putting out a piece of content and having 10 people talk about how you think you're an influencer now, then आप larger problems तो handle नहीं करोगे. So even if it's something that you think that's way bigger than you right now, and if you're really embarrassed, you'll get used to it. Think of it, the moment you stop thinking of embarrassment as something that's negative, and you start thinking of it as like as as like a passage ritual of sorts where you have to do this to become something, then you can make a little bit of peace with it because it's more like a learning curve, right? And even with imposter syndrome, for example, it doesn't exist because the more you learn in any space or in any industry or in any field of knowledge, like for example in nutrition for me, जितना सीखता हूँ मुझे लगता है that's it's insufficient. Every time I learn something new in my head, I'm like, yeah, now I realize that there's even more to learn. So the more I know, the
Yes.
less I feel I know. So that's never
Absolutely.
going to happen. The only thing that you can do to make sure that you safeguard yourself against saying something that you know nothing about is to make sure that whatever you put out, if it's a piece of content, if it's an opinion or whatever, it's well researched, and make sure that you know what you're talking about. Because let's say even if there's like 100 things related to your industry that you have no clue about, if you're talking about only the things that you're sure of, then imposter syndrome technically doesn't kick in because you're sure of what you're saying, even if it's like two things that you know.
And also, like, just talking about our example, obviously we're very new in this whole content journey, but the first video that we sort of took out, we were like, कि यार, how will people look at us? Will they judge us? And the moment we pushed it out, we realized that nobody was watching it, right? So we got maybe like 50 views in on the first 7 days or something like that, and the average watch time was like 30 seconds, 10 seconds or something like that, and slowly we realized that nobody really cares about it, and slowly we sort of became better at
The
it.
next question that people are thinking in the audience listening is that, okay, let's say I start, right? Let's say I start and put myself out there. I start creating reels, for that example, for that matter, right? Let's say I start creating reels, and somewhere along the way, I realize that this is working, and I want to now think about whether I should make this from a side hustle to a full time one, right? How does one person, at what point in their journey does one decide to make that move, and how do they take that kind of confidence? Like, do you need to have like a 5,000 following, probably like a 10,000 following, when you decide that, you know what, I'm going to go out and do this full time?
Yeah, I think following has nothing to do with it. I mean, of course, a larger audience is always, all other factors held constant, a bigger audience compared to a smaller one of the same quality will always help. But I left my job when I had like 15, 1600 followers. So,
Oh,
Oh,
what?
uh,
That's
wow,
yeah,
insane.
wow,
because
okay.
dude, but see, at that point in time, for me, it was slightly different also because there was someone who was essentially a mentor for me at that point of time. His name is Aman Bindra. He is the founder and nutrition coach. So while I was creating content for myself, I was also creating content for his page. Um, and he helped me a lot during times when I was like, damn, ye to chal nahi raha. Like I'm scared. What should I do? So anyway, um, see, there's a few variables here. No, let's say you have your job from 9 to 6. Let's say, um, if you're able to maximize the amount of effort that you're putting in from 6 to 9, for example, or 6 to 10, whatever, after your job, and you're like, all right, cool. Now my growth is limited by the number of hours I put in, and not my efforts during these hours. Like you're like, now the only thing that will make me grow further is putting in more hours. Then leaving your job is on the table as an option. Then you have to ask yourself, does this have any long term prospect? Like if, let's say, for example, if what I was doing, if I hit a cap कि हाँ ठीक है इसके ऊपर I will never grow because industry ऐसी है या फिर कुछ भी हो सकता है, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but if there's something that's limiting my growth, that all right, cool, in this endeavor or this side hustle, I'll never make more than this or I'll never grow more than this, then quitting your job is just not a smart thing to do because there's no future prospect of growth. So, one, if you maximize your time; two, if there's future prospect of growth; and three, I think, which is relevant for most people, um, being financially stable-ish, or at least having a cash reserve that can push you for the next 6 months if things don't work well.
True.
Because if, and 6 months ऐसे ही off the top of my head है मेरा, because I was saving from college, frankly speaking, मेरा उससे ज़्यादा था. So maybe that's why I was a little more comfortable, like leaving my job at 1600 followers. But having something where you know for a fact that that will last you for a while, during which you can try out everything you need to, and if in case it doesn't work, you can also take the next couple of months to find the next best job that you can also, if it doesn't work out. Because in the grand scheme of things, 6 months of you trying something out doesn't really, it's not that big of a loss of time.
A follow-up question on that, right? Like, you said that you left at 1,600 followers. Now, does someone who's probably trying to start out like you, does someone like convert his or her existing uh, uh, personal page into a business page, or would you recommend doing the other version of starting from scratch?
I now, in hindsight, would recommend starting from scratch.
Okay.
And this
What?
is for a very interesting reason. I can't respond to DMs anymore now. Like I physically cannot. I might, let's say if whatever's at the top, I might respond to that. But I also feel guilty that I'm like, yeah, I mean, there's so many messages that go unread or unseen. And sometimes they're from important people. If I
Okay.
and
Yeah.
sometimes when you look at
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
messages and you're like, oh damn, this person texted me before.
Yeah.
And I'm like, shit, I should have replied, because now if I reply, it'll just be rude.
Makes sense.
Um, I can't hand off my account to someone else either.
Yeah.
Because it was a personal account for like 6 years before it became a professional
True.
account. So I'll either have to go back and like delete everything. So from that point of view, where you might want to hand off certain processes when it comes to your social media to someone else, either you really have to trust the person that you're handing it off
Yeah.
to, or you don't hand it off at all. So
Yeah.
I think that's the only reason why I would ask people to like switch. Other than that, it doesn't really matter, because if you're solving a universal problem like fitness was for me,
Yeah.
like how I'm solving fitness problems. Fitness is something that everyone wonders about at least once in their life. So even if I have a personal following and they're not following me because I'm into fitness, if I have a fitness related problem to solve, it's very likely that they'll need to hear it. So for me, that transition was pretty simple. People who were already following me were
Interesting.
sort of interested.
Yeah, I,
So
I,
Interesting.
I couldn't have
Yeah.
imagined of that side of the story, because I would automatically think that you have a ready base of following, why not start off from there? But when you think about it, all
yeah,
the sort of personal details, everything that you probably want to,
yeah.
yeah, that's a fair point.
And I think interesting switch now, because you just spoke about fitness being a very broad niche, right?
Yeah.
So what we want to essentially understand is that what we were obviously researching and stalking you stalking your
Don't say
Instagram,
stalking,
right?
man.
So we saw a very interesting bio that you have essentially put out, right? So it's basically fitness, lifestyle, and motivation, or something of that sort. Do you want to essentially target people who aren't just looking for fitness but also looking for, let's say, some kind of motivation, because fitness in itself is a pretty crowded space when we are looking at it from an outsider's perspective, and there are like some behemoths even in India, right? You have Jeet Salal, you have all these big guys who are essentially just doing fitness. So is it like you're carving your own sort of niche by introducing this motivation aspect?
See, I won't lie to you. This is not deliberate. I didn't like
Okay.
think of it strategically, but I think it's also the path that fitness has allowed me to take. Um, I'm extremely average at everything I've ever done, and I feel like fitness was one of those things that basically enabled me to do better at everything else. Because it, see, loosely speaking, if you want to get your life together, the first thing you need to do is that you need to be a little healthier and you need to like start taking care of yourself. And anyone who's, let's say, been in the dumps mentally, or like life is flattening them out or whatever, you can't pour out of an empty cup. So the first thing that, let's say, if you're dissatisfied with your life, the first thing that you need to ask yourself is, am I taking care of myself? But that's only step one. But I think
Interesting.
the reason why that's in my bio is because I want people to care about their fitness, but care about so much more than their fitness. Because there's other pillars to having a fulfilling life. There's your wealth, there's happiness, there's your relationships, all of that. Focus on that also. Bench press mat marte reh jana is what my point is, even though I'm a fitness page.
Think your
Very
niche,
interesting.
your niche then sort of becomes, again, not just again just bodybuilding in general, right? But more about lifestyle, right? Just having an excellent
Yeah.
lifestyle,
Yeah.
health,
Yeah.
Yeah.
being
Absolutely.
confident, having self-esteem. But it's interesting how you're very the way you carry yourself is very with a lot of confidence, at least on socials. You put up a lot of stories telling people that, you know what, chase your goals, do your stuff, hit the gym, right? It's very motivating, and I feel like for a lot of you guys who probably don't know, and this is not a paid sponsorship, but I actually am under the coaching of Francesco here, and the best thing about his sort of services is that he keeps you accountable, and he's always making sure that you're doing your best from a lifestyle perspective. And that's what I realized, that, you know what, he doesn't just help you with the gym and all. He's looking out for you in other areas as well, and I feel like that's where your service sort of has transitioned into.
Eventually, I do want to expand to a point where I can help people with more than just getting fit, and perhaps help them with the
Yes.
rest of the staircase as well. Kind of like,
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
fitness and there's your social life, then there's what you do at work, and then so on and so forth. The dream would be, I don't know how I'll do it. I still haven't figured that out. I'm not going to lie, I don't have a strategy in place yet. But if I had a wish, I would wish to be able to do more than this and to help people with the ladder through and through.
Yeah.
Maybe like
So
an Ali
who
Abdal,
knows?
like a productivity guru, and then you mix fitness in that, and then make it a good cocktail of
Or
all
even a
this.
dating coach for
Who
that
knows?
matter. Dating coach for that matter.
Arey bro, वो तो
Yeah.
मिलता भी नहीं. That's out of my league.
Yeah, Francesco, you have the looks, man. You can do it. Trust me. You can pull it off. I trust you.
Bro,
Great.
I'm not going to respond to that.
Cool. So, actually, Dhruv and I were watching Ali Abdal ka video, right? So, and he talks about the fact that every creator has an unfair advantage, right? And you obviously said that you're in this motivation / fitness space where you want to essentially help in the overall life of a person, right? So,
Yeah.
so even though that might sound generic and all, right, what do you think is your sort of unfair advantage? Why are people following you and not following someone else?
Yeah, this is my best guess, right? And a lot of things could count here. Maybe it's my content type because I've built my following mostly on educational content. Maybe it's the fact that I'm not competing on like, oh look at my physique, buy my services, but I'm actually putting out information and being like, yeah, you know what, use this. And then when people use it and they're like, oh damn, like this works, then the first person that they think of when they need a service or when they want to get coached is me. But I think another another thing that might be playing a role here is the fact that I'm not attached to fitness how other fitness people are attached to fitness.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
you know how a lot of the fitness creators, like you generally end up wondering, does this person do anything else except for just being fit? And that's not
True.
something that most people can relate to. It's almost, but for me, fitness is again a very small part of life. And unless and until you're extremely passionate about fitness, which most people who aren't already fit are not passionate about fitness, um, then I think it's just easier for them to relate to me. I don't really love working out as much as people would think a fitness dude would love working out. It's I honestly would rather just go for a dinner with my friends or go chill in some random place and you get the vibe, right?
Yeah.
Like workouts make you
Yeah.
feel good, but it's not something that I would prioritize over everything else. And I think that's just a sentiment that a lot of other people can sort of relate to because in their heads it's like, yaar, ye mujhe karna padega. Then I'm like, I agree. Mujhe bhi karna padta hai. If I could, I would be going out for like a hot chocolate fudge right now. So I completely understand. And I think having gone through that curve is something that a lot of people would also appreciate and relate to, unlike other
Yeah.
fitness people who would live and breathe protein. I can't do that. So
Yeah.
I think that's where my unfair advantage is because I'm closer, at least sentimentally, to my audience than the average fitness dude online.
To summarize again, I feel like for our listeners who are probably thinking about, okay, you know what, if I have to start a business, an Instagram page for that matter, if it's fitness or something else, I would have started. And I feel like you just need to probably have like 80% focus on what you're good at. For example, in your case, it's fitness. Probably 10-20% a flexible area where you feel like, you know what, this is also something I can differentiate a bit from the market and probably inculcate in sort of my business, right? Where again you have done the lifestyle bit and now it's become like a 50-50% where fitness is 50%, lifestyle is 50%, right? So that's pretty interesting. And that brings us to the next sort of segment of this podcast, which is again about how you've built up your service, because I'm extremely intrigued by, you know, how you've pulled it off, because I know a lot of people who run Instagram pages, right? I personally have worked with creators for that matter. But I don't know a lot of people who have monetized it, like genuinely built a service off of the Instagram following. Like, for example, I know people who do sponsorships, but somewhere along the way they sort of, they lose steam in their engine, and ultimately, you know, they go nowhere, right? And their following just tanks, right? Whereas from probably day 100 or something, you've also built up your service along the way, which is again, I think, Francesco Till's Consulting, if I'm not wrong, right?
Francesco Till's Fitness.
Francesco Till's Fitness. Sorry. So I think the question essentially that I'm asking is, one is that a lot of fitness. There's a lot of fitness companies out there. Firstly, right? And a lot of these guys have very discounted plans, whereas I've seen that your sort of service has a little bit of a premium on the sort of plans in the market. How do you feel like you differentiated yourself for people to come to you instead of going out to this just the general services in the market, right? Like, how do you feel like you've differentiated yourself in that way?
See, at some point of time, if you're now this is in no by no means am I throwing shade on any of the companies that you mentioned or even the ones that you didn't mention, because frankly I'm not experienced at services, so I try to keep myself away from the competition. I do my own thing.
Of course.
But I don't think I'm competing on price anymore. You know how sometimes, okay, so I think, and I could be so wrong about this because all I know is things about fitness in my industry, but I'm sure there would be some carryover to other industries as well. There's a point beyond which you just don't compete for prices anymore. Then what you can charge for your service is premium and beyond, and that threshold, once you cross, then after that you could really charge a lot. Like for example, there's this dude, Yashvardhan Swami at Trained by YBS. That's his Instagram handle, and he charges at least like you know my pricing because you're a client of mine, but 10x that. Don't say it, but 10x that. So yeah, I feel like the moment you sort of have the right balance between the kind of audience that you have, because I truly think I have a very good quality audience. Like I wouldn't switch my account, hypothetically of course. I wouldn't switch it for any of the 100K follower wale influencers. I would never want to exchange audiences with them.
Right.
I'm fine at 20K. However it grows, it grows. But I truly feel like I have a good audience. So I feel like it's a match between my niche where there's fitness, but there's so much more to life than fitness. So get fit so you can enjoy the rest. That perspective of fitness being an enabler is something that a lot of people relate to. And apart from that, since I feel like because I've crossed like a threshold, although this is never enough. आप जितना पढ़ लो, आप जितना जान लो, in your head you'll always be like, damn, मुझे कुछ भी नहीं आता और मुझे और सीखना है और मुझे और जानना है. But I feel like I'm not competing on price anymore because I focus more on expertise, and I still do. So there's always room to grow. But I think those three things, focusing on expertise, having the right kind of audience through putting out the right kind of content. And of course, since I would assume that the larger companies would do it at scale where, they have like a lot of clients. I don't have the ability to have a lot of clients. I can't ever have, how sometimes when people are like, I have 100 clients or 200 clients. मैं सो नहीं पाऊंगा. I don't want to be at a point where I don't, like, you hear a client's name and you can't associate a face to it. I don't want to be that kind of a coach, I guess.
Wow, that's...
Makes sense.
I mean, I think you've cracked like a very interesting aspect in my head that I probably haven't thought about so far, which is again having a tinier, probably not tinier, but probably a little lesser following than the Instagram giants, right? I mean, because I feel like a lot of people think that, just because I'm at 100K or 1 million following Instagram, wow, this guy must be doing extremely well for himself, right? And they probably would be doing, but the point is also that if any of the listeners out there, right, if you guys probably want to go out and start something of your own, and it need not be that something that's already like hitting crores in revenue, right? It could be something like Francesco's business, which is again a little humbler following with a specific high quality audience, and you're able to give the best quality service to these set of clients, right? I feel like that's something that you've cracked extremely well, and that's amazing, right? That's pretty cool.
I think, like, going to the last segment, right? So, the audience that we are talking to right now, they are either thinking of building an audience or are at a very early stage with, let's say, 1,500, 2,000 followers, right? Over, let's say, the last 3-4 years, you have essentially grown from 1,500 to 21,000 21,000 followers on
Almost
Instagram.
21. Almost.
21,000 followers, yeah. 21,000 followers on Instagram. So, and obviously during this period of time, you have essentially made some mistakes. So what are some of those mistakes that uh, you wouldn't want someone who's starting out to not make? Uh, what would those be?
I'll tell you what my biggest mistake was. So it's very easy to be sucked into a bubble when you're starting out. Like for example, in the fitness space, it becomes a bit of a bubble where you start following fitness influencers or like even the smaller creators and everything, and like you think you're networking, but at the end of the day you only know fitness people. Any amount of inspiration, be it in terms of content, be it in terms of making my business better, be it in terms of being a better coach, whatever, apart from the technical knowledge about fitness, like knowing nutrition, knowing exercise, all of that, everything has its inspiration that has never come from the fitness space. In fact, I ran a vlog series in January. um, I called it 30 days of pushing it, but
30 days
Yes,
hard.
yes,
yeah,
Yeah,
we know
yeah.
that.
I
We've
it
stalked
It popped
it.
up
We've stalked
like
it.
it. I did not know you personally, or I did not really know your page, but I saw it on my feed and I sent it to Dhruv and I was like, this guy seems cool, right? And he was like, dude, he's my friend. I was like,
so cute, man. Love it. See, so that was something, and I'll tell you where I got that idea from. I got that idea from Dhruv. We were talking about this was one of our check-in calls, and I was taking a bit of an update on how everything is going, and he had certain doubts. Then he also said, "Why you not focusing on content? Because like maybe deprioritize everything else and focus on content a little bit." So I was like, "Why don't I just do like a daily series? Even if I have nothing important to say, I'll just at least document the process of me building my business." So even if it is like a more productivity centric thing, might as well, because what's the harm? And that idea did not come from the fitness space. And the moment I started it, a lot of the people in the fitness circle that I know of or are in touch with me in some sense, they also started their daily series. Most of the good things that you'll ever try, which haven't been overdone, like done 1,000 times before, you'll never get inspiration to do those things from inside of your industry. Or you might want to sort of try out things that the biggest people in your industry are doing, but any amount of inspiration that's borderline new, because nothing really is new, that you'll get from outside of your own industry. So don't be in that bubble, number one, of just being around other people who are starting out in the same industry. Look outside of it, because once you grow competent enough, you want your network to also be of people who are outside of your industry. And talking about network, don't network early on in your career thinking that, how sometimes when you start something out and like you want to go to like these creator conventions and seminars and everything, but if you really have no value to put on the table, like you've not worked on yourself and worked on your projects enough or worked on your career enough, what value will you give to someone else for them to even say something back to you? More often than not, a lot of these things where people are like, oh, I'm networking, it's like, bro, if you've done nothing on your own today, then your networking is basically just you networking with other people who also done nothing. And there's this friend of mine who has an incredible personal brand. His name is Saksham Gaur. His Instagram handles are How Saksham and Why Saksham. Very interesting Instagram handles. But he said in one of his webinars he took, he said, अगर दो गधे नेटवर्किंग करें तो वो दो गधे ही होते हैं. There's an exchange of stupidity over there. So, and that's so accurate, because if you don't have anything to offer to the world on your own, then you're most likely networking with someone else who also doesn't have anything to offer, and your exchange or you combining resources or brains is still offering nothing to the world. So don't network early on. Just put your head down and do things so that you can be like, all right, cool. Now someone would at least want to talk to me, and eventually networking ho jayegi. That's number two. And I think lastly, and this is one of the mistakes that I have been making up until very recently also. A lot of times you'll get opportunities, you'll you'll get projects, you'll think of projects that will give you a massive short-term return, and saying no to those is a little important, because now in hindsight, maybe if at the start of my career, maybe if I didn't focus on numbers that much, but I just went through a period of 6 months where I only just put out content, who knows, 20K would have been 100K today, who knows. I don't know if I want to go through that phase now when everything is stable and everything, or who knows, I just might. But play the long game, because that becomes an enabler to a much bigger future. And of course, maybe now I'm saying it in hindsight, because once you achieve something, then वो छोटी हो जाती है आपके सामने चीज. But saying no to the smaller stuff today can be incredibly hard, and smaller stuff in comparison to what you're trying to achieve maybe like 5 years down the line. So it's really hard to make that decision, because even if it's something that's bigger than you right now, it seems worth it. But if it's not bigger than what you're trying to do 5 years from now, um, probably say no to it. So I guess those
Yeah.
are my takeaways.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. Cool. I think that's about it. Dhruv?
Yeah, I think that's a wrap on today's episode. And again, if you if you've liked our episode so far, make sure you drop a like and share it with one friend. Make sure you check out Francesco's service. We'll put the link in the description box. I am personally using it, and obviously it's been pretty amazing for me so far. Right? Yeah. With that said, I think that's a wrap. That's me, Dhruv, and
Rakshit signing off.
And Francesco.
Francesco. Signing off. Take care. Have a good one.